it's Heron from the Westport River Watershed Alliance, and today we're going to learn a little bit more about the estuary by studying the tides and erosion. So we'll start off with tides, and tides just refer to the changes in the surface of the water here in the estuary, or really any large body of water. So the tides happen because of the pull, the gravitational pull on the Earth's surface from the sun and the moon. That pull brings the water to one side of the Earth, and as the Earth moves, it brings the water to the other side. We're going to check out and see if this water that we're standing right here by at the estuary is going to change over the amount of time that we're here in the estuary. We'll start off by placing a flag right here at the edge of the water, and over the hour that we're here, we'll see if the water is going to be moving in or moving out. So here's the flag. We'll put it right at the edge of the water. And when we come back in an hour, we'll see what changes the water has made. So we're going to use a model to talk about how the tides happen by the pull of the sun and the moon. So when you look at a model of the Earth is always spinning, and the moon is actually revolving around the Earth. So the sun has a pull on the Earth and the moon has a pull on the Earth. So the tides change throughout the months during the different positions of the moon. So sometimes when the moon and the sun are lined up, this time of the month is called the new moon, which means you can't see the light of the sun on the moon. The pull is lined up together, so it actually pulls on the surface of the Earth and brings the water to the side that's closest to the Earth, to the moon and the sun. So it makes higher high tides and lower low tides because the two, the moon and the sun, are in alignment. Then as the month goes on, the moon starts to move around the Earth as the Earth spins, and the gravitational pull from the sun is pulling in this direction, and the pull from the moon is pulling in an opposite direction. So they don't actually have as much pull on the Earth because the two are canceling each other out. So during this time of the month, when you're at quarter moon, it's lower, the tides don't move up and down as much, so you'd only have a little bit of a high tide and a little bit of a low tide. Wouldn't be those really big high and low tides. And then as the month goes on, and you have the full moon where the sun and the moon are still in a line, but they're across from each other, they actually do still cause pretty big high tides and low tides because they're both pulling in the same line. Then the month will end off and they'll be against each other again, and you'll have lower tides at that point. So when you're trying to figure out what the tides are in your area, you can find yourself a tide chart, just like this one that I have right here, and it will show you when the high tide of the day is and the low tide. Each day has usually 2 high tides and 2 low tides, and they're separated by 6 hours during the day. So today we're going to look at April 8th because that's the day that we're out here, and we can see on our tide chart when the line goes up like that, that's the high tide. When the line goes down, it's low tide. So when we look here, we can see today the high tide was at 6:13 a.m. and low tide was at 12:20, or it's going to be at 12:28 p.m. And it'll tell you also how high it's going to go. So this morning high tide was 3.5 feet over the mean tide, and the low tide was 0.3. So that's pretty high, but it's not for a full moon time. If we look at the moon for this week, it's actually a quarter moon. And then next week is a new moon, so we'd expect the tides to start getting bigger. High tides, and then a little bit lower low tides. Tides are really important to the creatures that live along the tidal areas. Things like birds and fish gain access to new food sources by traveling along the tides. Animals like horseshoe crabs and turtles also use the high tides of the month to travel further into the dry sand. those places are warmer and it's a good spot for them to lay their eggs. So tides are also responsible for changing and shaping the landscape. Many tidal areas are flatter and filled in with plants over years of surviving the changing tides. The flushing in and out of tides also causes erosion of the land surrounding the bodies of water, and we're going to take a closer look at erosion next. So we'll start off by learning what erosion is, and it's the process of the Earth's surface breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces. So a lot of times that's rocks breaking down into sand and lighter and smaller particles. Erosion can happen through natural causes like water causes erosion, ice, and wind. As water in an estuary comes up and hits the side of the estuary, it breaks the banks down into smaller and smaller pieces. And sometimes the pieces get so light that they're actually picked up and carried with the wind and deposited into a new location. Waves can also bring a lot of erosion to the side of the estuary or even by the ocean. And the waves are caused when we have big wind events. It brings the wind that pushes the water and makes big waves that slap against the side of the estuary. It can also happen from any disturbance in the water, a boat, kayak, things like that could cause smaller waves. Those waves hit the land that's on the side of the estuary or the ocean, and sometimes it causes the marsh to actually have erosion happen at the bottom of the marsh. And then you have the marsh will actually collapse. So it causes marsh collapsing because the water is eroding the land underneath, and the plants that are on top can't support it anymore. Depending on what kind of rocks you have in a certain area, when things erode, it makes different kinds of soil. So we're going to take a close-up look at the soil here in the estuary, and then we're going to compare it with the soil we see in the ocean. So when we dig into the soil over here at the estuary, you can see this really nice dark colored soil. And that's because the estuary has all of these plants on top of the land, which actually make nutrients and deposit it back in the soil. So this nice dark sand is just parts of those plant materials breaking down and making really fertile soil. Alright, so we're checking back at our flag to see how the tide has changed in the last hour. And you can see the tide is actually going out. So the flag that we placed there is now probably about 2 feet away from the edge of the water. So the water in the estuary is heading out to make it to full low tide. So we're going to compare the soil that we found over in the estuary to the soil we can find here at the ocean side. The ocean is just getting rocks from the water, and then when the waves crash together, those rocks hit each other, pieces of the rocks break off and then make the soil that's right over here. So there isn't all of that plant material that we found at the estuary. So when you look at the soil, it just looks like a lot of broken up rocks and shells. Thanks so much for listening and learning about the tides and erosion here at the ocean and comparing to the estuary. I hope we have a chance to learn a little bit more about the estuary at the next video.